Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week we're going on episode 1. We're going to talk about the 2023 writer's strike. It's been making headlines all week. It's been a huge deal for Hollywood. We're going to talk about its impact, what possibly can happen, what is currently happening with it, why it happened, and what people should really look at. But the last time it happened back in 07, 08, and what they can kind of expect this one to turn into, because it's very similar. But last time around, it shook Hollywood to the core, and I don't think people are taking this one as seriously as they should be. So let's sit down, let's talk about it, and here we go. Oh man, I don't even know. you know,
like, I think one of the things that you just touched on. First off, hello Taylor. You look fabulous. How you feeling?
Hello. I'm all right. I'm going to get my haircut tomorrow, so we're going to enjoy this length of hair for one last day.
One more day with my Rapunzel Taylor. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe some.
It's nothing like
not like the good old days. What's funny is I feel like part of our audience might be too young to remember what happened the first time around in 07, 08, but this writer's strike is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Like it's...
And you know what's crazy? Since 07 and 08, the online landscape has become even more saturated and gross, and never before are they demanding as much online content as they are demanding right now.
Yeah. But I think it's also kind of like part of the chorus, isn't it? Like what happened since the last writer strike, it did shake Hollywood to its core. It changed the entire landscape of how Hollywood operated. And it went for 100 days, and it just... Did I lose you?
Just for a second.
Okay.
I guess we have to talk about what it is first, because I don't make sure people understand what that is. But I feel like Hollywood has been pedal to the metal, specifically since the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I feel like once they thought like everyone was just going to stay home and watch movies all day, there was such this push for everything. And I don't know if the industry has slowed down at all.
It really hasn't. So to kind of explain what it all is for everybody, just so everyone is aware of what's happening, the WGA, the Writers Guild of America, it has two factions, WGA East, WGA West. Essentially, every few years, I think it's every 2 to 3 years, they negotiate new contracts with the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers, the AMPTP. This essentially is every year they kind of just go over, hey, we're going to renew our contracts, we're going to change some stipulations, everything and so forth. When COVID happened, the world kind of went in this weird limbo. And we definitely lost... We're still feeling the effects of just movies at that time. Movies had to be filmed differently. Things were changed from the ground up. But now...
side note, is there any movies that you saw that felt like COVID movies to you, where you saw it and you were like, oh, none of these, this does not feel like a normal movie?
Jurassic World, Dominion. I mean, that was one of the first movies that was filmed completely with COVID protocols. And you watch the movie and you can see literally in every single scene, only 2 or 3 actors are there at a time. It was
Taylor, it blows my mind that whole movie is just sets. Yeah. It's just huge sound stages where, funny enough, before that, Jurassic Park always felt like a movie in the world, real jungles and stuff like that. Man, that movie feels like storybook land.
Yeah, it was very... Part of me feels like they should have just waited till COVID was over to film the thing, because I can see what they were doing, what they were trying for, but it definitely suffered from the scope that by doing what they did.
You know what other movie felt like that to me? And it was the beginning of this trend with the Marvel movies, but Black Widow feels like a big little movie. In any scene, it's two people across a table or a desk, and I was like, this is not how a normal superhero movie would be.
Yeah. But even then, like, you can look at even some of the new ones, like Ant-Man and the Wasp. You can tell that thing was filmed on the volume sets. So I mean, there's a. I mean, take The Mandalorian and take Andor. When you look at side by side, Andor is filmed pretty much on location. They do a lot of big natural sets, things like that. Same with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mandalorian was using the volume tech for a lot of stuff, and you can see that in certain scenes. But there's a scene in Ant-Man and the Wasp where you have like Ant-Man, Cassie, and Hope all standing together, and you can see the floor, right?
Mm.
And then you can see the line where the volume begins. And that's my issue with the volume tech. And that was something that really took effect because of COVID, because you have to have these big scenes, but you can't film them the same way. So you have to have 2-3 people on a time, and you just build the scene from there up.
I never even thought about it like that. I thought it was, they liked that you could move I've only ever heard the pro pitch for it, but do you think it was because of COVID stuff?
I think COVID has a huge effect on why people are using it more and more now. Like, it's the easiest way to get around COVID protocols. I mean, if you can only have 2 or 3 people on a set at a time, use a volume system.
Yeah, and you know what movie did that too? Great effect was that new Batman movie.
Yeah.
That movie, all of those sets, I remember watching like, how did they do this? Now knowing how they did it, they shot it very well, but they also have to be cognizant of how they're shooting. And I wonder if like the blackness of Batman looked better than crazy inside world of Ant-Man.
Right. So, I mean, the COVID pandemic did what it did to the Hollywood industry, and now a new writer strike has occurred. And to kind of go into happening this time around, let's talk about what happened last time around, because I think that was the one that you said it yourself. A lot of people are either too young or weren't around in the 07-08 timeframe, or just don't realize the gravity of it. So this occurred back in November of 07, right? It went from November 5th of 07 to February 12th of 08. The Film and TV Screenwriters of America, the unions basically unilaterally said we're going on strike. The issue at the time was essentially because of residuals. You had in the world of Hollywood, residuals are when, like, you do a project, you do something, you get a residual for every time that project airs on TV, and it happens a lot in syndication. But they were not getting, any of the writers were not getting a single residual off of DVD sales. They had these issues as soon as it became like a big flux in the market, and with Blu-ray around the corner and everything like that, DVD sales and everything in between were a huge factor of why this strike occurred.
And there's two things that I want to talk about here for this landscape. And I'm so happy you brought up DVD sales. Excuse me. The world didn't understand that there were going to be markets for television shows when they weren't on air. And 2 shows come to mind during that time where the DVD sales of the show propelled the show to newer heights. The first and most famous one was Family Guy.
Right.
Family Guy.
That brought it back from the dead.
Literally brought it back from the dead. And look what it did. Family Guy came back and has now been on the air, and with everything looking like it is, Family Guy will probably go on as long as The Simpsons.
Yeah. I mean, Family Guy's been going for like 20 years at this point.
Right. I haven't watched Family Guy in 5 years. I'm sure they're making great jokes, but Family Guy will always have that audience. The second show was The Chappelle Show, which had crazy DVD sales. That part of the landscape, which is no longer true, everybody. In 2023, physical media sales are no longer there. So that revenue stream that they thought the first time around is no longer there. The second thing I wanted to bring up is that in 07-08, the streaming wars hadn't even started yet. So what you would see is The Daily Show would have its own Comedy Central Flash player. Like, it wasn't all on YouTube and stuff yet. So they would, if you were to go watch one show, you would see whatever ads they had booked for that spot. But it was ads just for that thing. It wasn't like a YouTube algorithm, and they were seeing none of that money at all. And they said, we already paid you for your product, so why would we pay you a second time? Which is crazy because of what Taylor was talking about with syndication. Now, I'm assuming our audience is very familiar with the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
How are these issues now popping up again, Taylor?
So last time around, it was essentially DVD residuals. It was home video residuals. It was things like that were a huge factor. And to kind of explain what this did, that 100-day strike cost the industry, I think the reported number was about, let me see if I can find it, about $2.1 billion is how much it cost for that 100-day strike. That's a lot.
And it's not only like creative time, but like I have one writer friend who has written a show. The show is being produced right now. He can't even be on set while it's filming because his Writers Guild is on strike. So there's also filming of things that's not happening right now. And meetings and all of that stuff, it's all goes to zero.
Yeah. And the last time it happened, their fans should be aware of some of the things that occurred. I mean, the TV show Lost at the time was one of the biggest TV shows on air. Seasons 1, 2, and 3 were these massively long, I think 26 episode seasons.
It's a silly thing. It's a silly thing to say. It was must-see TV.
Yeah.
It was the best show on television.
Yeah.
And if I didn't go to Taylor's house and watch it or go to somebody else's house and watch it, there was no, again, those streaming services weren't there. Hopefully someone TiVo'd it for you, but it just wasn't there yet. It was the biggest show on TV.
It was the biggest show on TV, and they had these massive seasons. And then post the writer's strike, the new system was that seasons can't be that long, and you can only do maximum 13 episodes a season. And this bottlenecked that show. And if you actually look at the show as a whole, 1, 2, and 3, massively long seasons, 4, 5, and 6, tiny seasons. You can essentially fit the last 3 seasons into one season of that show.
Which makes me wonder what Lost would have looked like if that didn't have happened. I don't think they could have continued that pace anyway, but I bet it would look different.
We could go down a rabbit hole because I've looked into this stuff. There was some stuff that they had planned that was super cool. And they were going to answer a lot more questions. They're going to do a few more mysteries. The idea of the show was still going to continue the way it did, but it would have been massively more fleshed out. Another huge casualty of that show was the TV show Heroes. I was a tremendous fan of that first season. That tagline, "Save the cheerleader, save the world," was such a cool hook. And season 1, to this day, I will argue that it's one of the completed seasons of any TV show. The way season 1 wrapped itself up, so good.
It's one of the best like superhero thing that isn't Marvel or DC. It felt like this great, like, oh, somebody else can do it. And then season 2 happened.
And the problem with what season 2 was that show was still filming during the writer's strike. So because of the strike, they had to finish filming, but they couldn't do what they wanted to do because they couldn't write it. So you see this season where literally it stonewalls near the end, and it becomes this really anticlimactic and like, what the hell was this kind of a thing? And then the show limped on ever since because they couldn't do what they wanted to do.
It was dead in the water. I mean, I remember. Is there a season 4? It's only season 3, right?
No, there's season 3, season 4, and then they did like a revisit season a few years ago, and it's all just been, nothing was as good as that first season.
Yeah,
and then you have for DC fans the entire Justice League Mortal debacle, because Justice League Mortal was DC's literal first jump into the multiverse angle. This was before MCU started. They had this project where they were going to introduce a new Justice League and then spin off an entire universe off of it and then do this multiverse angle right off the bat. They were on location. They were ready to start filming. The strike occurred. They shut down. The project died.
I had no idea about that. And to put that in perspective, the movies have to pay for all this stuff out there. The studio can't afford to pay these people that aren't striking for 100 days of no work. Mm-hmm. So it just ends, and then it becomes a wash, right? They already paid for those lights once around. Wow. Taylor, it killed all of DC's momentum. I mean, look how long it took for them to even get it back.
Yeah. And I mean, mind you, there was so many more examples like that. Like I remember watching on TV when it happened, and Conan O'Brien's show, because he wasn't allowed to have his writers, he would go on every night, and there were some episodes where he would just like spin a coin and flip things and be like, "We can't. I have to make my own jokes. I have to bide some time. So let's do something ridiculous. Let's talk with the audience." And like it turned into nothing like it was because the lack of audience, the lack of the writing meant they couldn't prepare anything. They weren't allowed to prepare anything.
And
it made
that's
it
and that's a big
difficult.
thing, especially for comedy shows. You know, yes, they're doing the jokes every day, and I'm sure we could look at some headlines right now and write jokes about it. But it's like, oh, I loved when Colbert would go on location. Those things they have to write those scripts. They have to get those things. And if it's anything of importance, you sometimes have to get clearance. Like if you wanted to do a song where it's called I'm effing Matt Damon, maybe you have to send that lyrics over so his team can approve it beforehand.
Yeah.
Like none of that stuff's happening.
Yeah. And so kind of fast forward to right now, the 2023 writer strike, it began.
Can I just also say, I think this might be the first of many strikes. I feel like Hollywood, we're not talking about the 1%. The 1% of any industry is already going to be fine. But the normal people of Hollywood, the people who tell Taylor things secretly, these are people that punch in and out of a shift like you and I do. They have projects. They are looking for their next paycheck. These are people that are also hurting by this writer strike happening.
Yeah.
But these industries have all been pushed so hard, and they're doing dirty tactics by, oh, you're not an employee. You're just you're just a private contractor. We'll just pay you for this one thing, but no benefits. Yeah. Okay. Get into it, but it's gross.
So the new writer strike occurred last week. Like it kicked in on the 2nd. And what ended up happening was they essentially were like, hey, look, we're not getting any residuals from streaming media. It's the same argument. Like we weren't getting residuals because of DVD sales and home video sales. They got that. And then the entire market shifted over to streaming. And because of that, the residuals disappeared. And I see things on Twitter where people are like, this is my residual for this last season. And it's like 2-3 cents. Like they're like, I got nothing from this.
And we know the analytics of these shows. And there are shows that have had big resurgence in streaming. Community comes to mind, where these shows find a new audience. Was those writers' room paid for Netflix streaming numbers? Probably not.
And I mean, look at what happened, like the whole debacle that happened with HBO taking Big Bang Theory and Friends, or Peacock taking The Office, things like that. Like these apps centered around these TV shows that these writers are not getting anything from. And it's absolutely insane. And then the other big thing that they on about, aside from the residuals, is the new issue of artificial intelligence writing scripts. Things like ChatGPT and other tools that people are using to essentially cut out the need for writers. So this is a huge factor. And then you have things literally like what's happening with Max right now, with HBO Max, and they're filming the 2nd season of the House of the Dragon. The scripts were completed, but they literally said, we can't afford to stop filming, so we will use AI to fill in any gaps if we need to.
Taylor, I didn't know they said that. I thought they said, wow.
Yeah. Like, it's the most insane thing, because most of the time when you're filming a show, you have to have a writer on set in case something changes and you have to do a last-second rewrite. That's very normal. And that's why production of so many things have died. But also look at it this way. And another thing that I want to point out, because everyone's like, oh, Warner Brothers is the devil for this thing. Disney Plus, as a platform, has never released any of their properties that are Disney Plus exclusives on home release. That means every single writer and individual involved has seen zero residuals for any of the projects they're on.
So if you're going to tell me Mandalorian's the highest streaming show on television, now maybe not anymore, but that first season of the show was really great. They probably saw nothing out of it.
Exactly.
They got paid their salary. That was it.
And then you have with Netflix and Stranger Things, one of the biggest TV shows of all time. I think it was only the first 2 seasons went to home release, and they were exclusive to Target, and they didn't make the rest of them because they didn't sell, because no one went to them.
Right.
So you have these massive TV shows that are literally changing the landscape of how people are consuming content, that the writers were getting paid nothing in residuals.
And like I'm watching Seinfeld right now. It's our go to bed. Yeah, we go to sleep. We get in bed, turn on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David wrote a show, and the success of that show, they never had to write again. Now, that was because of they had the rights to it and stuff like that. But you don't hear that anymore about writers. You know what I mean? Like they're still having to write more and more and more stuff.
Yeah. It's just insane. And so right now we're literally a week into this thing. And since then,
Taylor, it's barely started. People don't even know. It's barely started.
The negotiations are still stonewalled, but there's like an insane amount of things. And I'm going to pull up, here's a list of everything that has now been shut down by the current strike.
And you mentioned some of the things you mentioned have already had problems.
Yeah.
Taylor told me about Daredevil. Daredevil feels like it's been coming out forever.
Right. All right. So here we go. The award shows that have been shut down because of the strike. The AFI Life Achievement Award tribute to Nicole Kidman has been shut down. The MTV Movie Awards, that was last night or the night before. It was supposed to be live. They had to use the pre-recording initial one that they did, the dry run, because they weren't allowed to have the right, and because Drew Barrymore, I think Drew Barrymore, right?
She should. Drew Barrymore pulled out. Yeah.
She refused to do the live show.
This is all bad because those MTV executives, those producers went right to ChatGPT and are going to start asking these robots to write for them.
All right, and talk shows that have all been shut down.
Yeah.
Daily Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, Late Night with Seth Meyers, Late Show with Stephen Colbert, Real Time with Bill Maher, The Talk, and The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon are all dead right now. They're not moving.
Not to mention shows that have probably been canceled that we will never hear about because they can't even start right now.
Right. TV shows that were currently in production that are now stopped completely. Abbott Elementary, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, The Hedge Knight, which is another Game of Thrones spinoff. They were in early, ready to go, shut down. Big Mouth, Season 8, which is supposed to be the last season, currently shut down. Bunked, Season 7. Cobra Kai, Season 6. Daredevil, Born Again, Season 1, shut down. Evil, Season 4, shut down. Good Trouble, Season 5, shut down. Hacks, Season 3, shut down. Jeopardy, Season 40 has been stopped. Loot, Season 2. Night Court, Season 2. The Power Book 3, Rising Kanan, Season 3, shut down. Saturday Night Live is currently off air right now. Severance, Season 2, shut down. Stranger Things, Season 5, the final season, shut down. Unstable, Yellow Jackets, and The Tyranny of Samantha Baird completely shut down. Like, this is just the beginning. This is in the first week. This is everything that's been shut down. And if this thing goes for the 12 weeks that the last one went, everything will be shut down.
Okay. So let me pick your brain for a second. Let's say this is the worst case possible and it goes the full amount of time. These shows then will get picked back up and start again, but it is going to push all of these productions, push everything down the line. So the things our audience wants to know, when does the Superman movie then happen? Because all of that timeline, Taylor, has now just been pushed this way.
So from what they've, in the first week, what we know is that things like Captain America 4, Deadpool 3, Fantastic Four, Good Burger 2, Psych, Superman Legacy, Piano Lesson, Thunderbolts are all still moving. However, they can shut down if this prolongs. Superman Legacy is written and directed by a member of the WGA. If he wants to stop production, he has every right to. And he only turned in his first draft of this film. He could literally say, if the studio says, we want to rewrite, we have this. He's like, we're on strike. We can't. So that means start date. I mean, they can still finish casting. They can still do everything. They get the ball rolling, hoping that by the time it's ready to go, it'll be over.
But mind you, especially with casting, people, if they get anyone of note in this movie, they might only have a window to do this movie. And now that window's changed.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff that is completely in limbo right now. Andor Season 2 should be still moving forward. Agatha, Coven of Chaos, The House of the Dragon, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, Wonder Man Season 1, Good Omens Season 2. These are all things that are still currently in production enough to where it can still happen. However, if the writer strike is prolonged, it can shut down.
So these shows are going to come out. So this is like the next month after summer, fall, and stuff like that. Do we start feeling this lack of new content beginning of next year?
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff that was set for this fall is still moving forward because it was already moving forward.
I was about to ask you, does this ruin Christmas? Are we going to get no new Christmas movies because everything they film in the summer?
Depends on how far this goes. I mean, the last one went for 100 days. So 100 days from now, that puts it in the middle of summer. They can move forward with a lot of stuff if they need to. A lot of this, I mean, we're likely going to see a lot of things kind of just a lot of not new things come out the Q4, Q1 of this next year, and everything pick back up in Q2. That's
Taylor,
what could be happening.
Should we start getting a little hashtag called release the air cut going? Because funny enough, this is the troubled water that make them go, all right, let's put a couple million and just finish it. Like this is the kind of stuff that makes that stuff come back.
This is 100%. And there's a lot of people asking about that. Like, should the air cut be released, or should the Red Book edition of Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, the vastly superior version of that film, should that also be released? Fully possible. Last time, like I said, it went 100 days. But the time before it was back in the 80s. And that one lasted, I think, almost a year.
Inflation's so bad. They could live for a year on normal salaries. That's crazy. Okay, but that's a long time.
It was the 1988 Writers Guild strike. It lasted 153 days, about half, like 6 months.
Wow.
Right? And that was insane.
And I believe didn't that writer's strike affect the filming of the first Batman movie?
It affected everything.
Yeah, okay.
Like back then, people don't realize that like the way we have our current landscape of films is that essentially every movie gets 6 weeks in film, and that's it. That's kind of how it is. Back when we were kids and as children of the 80s, you didn't buy movies on home release because the movie was typically in theaters for the better part of a whole year. And that was kind of how it went. If a movie was good enough, it would just stay in theaters until it stopped being profitable. So you could hide things like this where it could just leave it in theaters for longer, things like that. But the turnaround for making movies was a lot quicker. Like you could film a movie in January, February, and release it in August. It was just how it was. I mean, there's one of the most amazing stories is how Ghostbusters was made, right? The film was, let's see, film dates of first Ghostbusters. It released in June 4th, 1984. And I think it only finished filming like 6 weeks prior to the movie coming out. Like something just absolutely insane where they're like, we were down to the wire, we put it out, and it was like, the reason why that movie looks kind of janky is because they literally were still working on the special effects a week before they had to ship the reels. That's
amazing. That's crazy.
So there is so much about that film that if you like dig into it, I think there's a documentary on Netflix, like The Movies That Made Us. If you watch it, they mind blown by how the process went for that movie. But that's also some of the stuff that probably led to the first writer's strike, because that happened in 84. Right? So some of those conditions back then were just absolutely insane.
And like, that's pen and paper. They weren't writing this on email and then sending in the changes. You know what I mean? It was like a guy had to drive somewhere. I mean, it's the landscape of the world that we live in is so crazy, and that they're still taking advantage of writers like this.
Yeah. But I mean, if you look at any studio, right? Disney CEO salary, right? Bob Iger's current salary is, let's see. Oh yeah, Bob Chapek, who just left, got a $20 million exit pay.
For doing what? For ruining all of our favorite shows. This last year of Disney has not been good.
People like the writers are like, hey, if one guy, obviously you have the same argument that they're having the most risk behind themselves because they're the head of the goat kind of thing. Like they're at the top, so there's a huge risk to them. I get that. But a lot of the writers are striking, basically saying, look, if you just took $2 million less, $3 million less, and just allocated those funds back to the writers, the strike wouldn't have occurred.
And what's crazy is this is true of every studio.
Every studio.
You know what I mean? What if we were to look at the paychecks of Netflix or Paramount Plus? I guarantee you, they're all making bonuses and making those bonuses based on numbers that the writers aren't seeing any of.
What's very interesting is that even today,
Look at the joke that South Park made a whole joke. The streaming wars were like, oh, they're paying us more money, so we have to write for them. But aren't you technically under I mean, it's that crazy right now.
So just earlier today, just a few hours ago, MTV News shut down. Okay. Paramount, literally, a headline came out of Deadline. Paramount has laid off 25% of its domestic staff. MTV News, among many others that are completely shut down. Like
25%.
It's a huge thing, right? It's insane. And that's just the start of it. You're going to see this kind of unilaterally across every studio very quickly. You thought the bloodbath that Disney just did a few weeks ago was bad. This is going to be so much worse.
Our Disney friend works in linking Hollywood to the theme park, so they are still employed. But
yeah, I spoke with him about it, and he said that he's still good, but he's knew a lot of people that lost their jobs, and he basically said that this is quite literally a bloodbath that no one has ever seen before. And that was the smallest of what's about to occur across Hollywood.
Do you think that this is they're firing the people they hired during COVID because they overestimated what they thought this was going to be, and that's going to be where these cuts start coming from?
What's most interesting about this whole thing is that in COVID, when COVID occurred, you had Warner Brothers at the time decided that they were going to do their day one digital and the idea was COVID is a thing, streaming is the future. Let's basically just focus all of our funds towards streaming. And clearly it didn't work out for anybody. Everyone is now realizing that theaters are necessary. TV is still necessary. Everything was still necessary. And you had studios who, like Warner Brothers, went bankrupt because of these decisions. Because they put so much into streaming. And mind you, so much went into streaming. And that's kind of what led to this writer strike, that they hired writers to make content. They hired everything. And then nobody got paid residuals. Nobody got paid for extra work. And it's insane.
Yeah, it's a weird work-life balance that we just, all these industries, people work from home and they're like, oh, well, they'll work less. It's like, no, because your email dings and you respond, or your phone buzzes and you do a thing. So, you're supposed to just be able to focus and work on these things. And the world is very difficult, especially to focus on all of those things.
Yeah. So, I mean, what we know is that the Superman Legacy script was submitted before the strike occurred. So pre-production can move forward. But like I said before, if they get all the sets ready, if they get all the plans ready, all the casting, all the crew, everything ready, and then they're ready to start filming and the strike is still occurring, that's it. But it also means that Superman Legacy is the first of DC's new wave and the only one that can move forward right now until the strike is done.
Oh, very interesting. So if they were planning on piggybacking this or casting choices from this, those productions can't start at all.
None of the other productions anywhere near ready because you can't hire writers during the writer strike. You can't hire
Taylor, do you think that this writer strike will boost the Flash numbers? Do you think that because there is going to be content that's coming out that is completed. And if people aren't going to watch their new TV show, do you think they go to the theaters?
I think yes. I think honestly, people are going to see that the movies that are coming out may be it for a while. And they'll go to the theaters.
Aquaman 2 might get saved, Taylor. People might go yeah, it's weird, but at least it's something.
Yeah. It's I got nothing else to watch. Let's go watch it.
I wanted to ask you because I think I believe you'll have an answer. What is the process of, okay, we're writing, let's say we were going to do a superhero movie. We write the script. When do we need to send that script to the visual effects people? When does that happen? Because that's also not happening.
So essentially what's happening now is that everything that was done is done, right? But like for instance with Superman Legacy, right? The script was turned in. Because it was turned in, it can move forward. But the moment the actual start date and everything has to get ready to go, it could be in troubled water. And if anything changes on set, I mean, mind you, people don't realize how many scripts go through changes while they're filming. Avengers Endgame, like, oh no, here's a fantastic example of what the writer's strike did to a movie. Transformers 2. They were
Tell me
filming
more.
that.
Transformers 2 is a hot garbage movie. It did great because people went and saw the first movie, but
Yeah.
Transformers 2 is a crazy movie.
That movie, if you actually watch that movie and kind of look at the continuity of it, and if you look at what the original screenplay planned for, half of that movie was changed during filming because they couldn't do what they wanted to do because of the writer's strike.
Wow.
Like, it's insane stuff. So we have the potential of movies currently in production, movie projects currently in production, everything. If this goes as long as the last one went, it's gonna like shake Hollywood to its core. Plus, you have the fact that studios like Marvel put out their 5-year plan publicly every time they do this.
Yeah.
That plan is now out the window because Blade is shut down again, right? Like, how many times this movie keep down?
Right. And if Blade was supposed to set up the Dark Knight, or what's the character? Who's Jon Snow going to be? Black Knight?
Black Knight, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. You don't disrespect the Black Knight. He'll chop you up. Okay, so that's not going to happen. And then who knows what Daredevil is supposed to be setting up? Isn't Daredevil supposed to be the centerpiece of all of these TV shows into the cinematic universe?
Yeah, it's supposed to be what leads into the street level heroes being a part of the Secret War. And if you can't have the street level stuff move forward, I mean, mind you, the Secret War and everything else, like all of these projects are stopped. Like
the other project that just came to mind, because you just talked about timelines, what's going to happen with these new Star Wars movies?
I missed what you said. It froze on me. You said,
what's going to happen with the Star Wars movies that were just announced?
They are not allowed to work on them until the writer's strike is over.
And they barely started on those.
Yeah. Like I said before, Andor has been put in limbo currently. I mean, it's still being filmed, but anything post Andor, Mandalorian season 4, which is already written, Ahsoka season 2, anything else that they wanted to do, like it's literally just at a standstill.
Funny enough, I know that many of these writers also work on video games. I wonder, video games is a whole other industry, and sadly, they'll just sacrifice the writers and can work on a bunch of other pieces. But I do wonder, that Suicide Squad game has been coming out for 1,000,000 years. I wonder if it'll be affected by this. I know it will be, but I wonder if it'll be affected at all at this point in its life cycle.
So the current writer strike is only against the film and TV union. So video games can still move forward. A lot of these writers can probably continue picketing, and if they need to work, jump onto a AAA game real fast.
Yeah, but I can let you know this. I don't think the writing conditions are any better in the video game industry. And I wonder if those individuals see any residuals, and I bet they don't.
We'll see. I don't know, man. It is an absolutely crazy thing. And I think people are taking this very lightly because I do want to talk, like next week, I do want to bring up a whole different topic of kind of more so DC stuff, but I don't think any of that stuff will matter if this thing goes as long as the last one did.
It might change the whole trajectory of the show because many of the things that I knew that we were excited to talk about, they might not be happening anytime down the pike. And I also wonder how this is going to change because where this will send people to is platforms like YouTube, where I can support one writer because he's writing this web show now. So I wonder what talent leave Hollywood because of this as well, if this goes 100 days.
Yeah. It'll be very interesting to see because I remember when the writer strike previously happened, Joss Whedon and his brother made the Doctor Horrible sing along, and that was
Yes.
like a huge internet phenomenon at the time because it was, and they released it as like a blog post.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forward. Basically, look at it this way: any movie or TV show that you're currently excited about that hasn't started filming is now in limbo.
With this spotlight being put on, people aren't happy with residuals on the back end. Do you think that this talk of strike will move over to any of the other industries going on right now?
I do, actually. I do. I mean, you could very well see that the other industries that do have similar working conditions, similar, like 100%. The whole world of the digital age has really shaken how everything currently works. And I could easily see that this writer strike is the cusp, the straw that breaks the camel's back for everything.
Yeah, it's funny as we're talking about AI being used to write scripts, but I know that the visual effects artists have terrible, they always are talking about the time crunch and numbers. When do you think we see AI used for a movie sequence? We see crazy art. They're going to say Ant-Man punches Captain America in the face, and then Captain America does a cool stance.
Yeah.
Draw it. Make it happen, and then we'll finish it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be absolutely insane to see what moves forward. But I honestly think that this is just the beginning. We're 1 week into a very long strike.
I just thought that this might be the shining time for anime, but you need somebody to translate those scripts and then write those scripts into English, and that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, unless these companies are I mean, dub shows are pretty much stuck right now. I mean, if you're an anime fan and you like dubs, you're gonna have to wait because
Taylor, I didn't even think about that. All your beautiful dubs aren't going to happen.
I still watch them in subs. I'm fine with that. I mean, Demon Slayer is still happening. I mean, they do the dub in they do the subtitles in Japan for us and they simulcast it. So we'll see what happens there. But Demon Slayer's season hasn't even started its English run yet, and it's not going to for a while.
Yeah, for a lot longer, and they're going to fall off the pace that they've had. They've been trying to keep up, but they're going to fall behind.
Yeah. So I'm very, very interested to see what happens here. Okay,
let's say best case scenario. Let's say that this has been going on a week. Let's say this goes on a month. They come to it, they get started. A month goes by. How far do you think these pushes things back? 6 months? A year?
I don't think it's as. I think it really comes down to how far the ball is rolling, because if it's all about schedules and time frame and everything like that, if they do resolve this in 90 days, if they lose 3 months, you can easily see a lot of these things get pushed. Everything gets pushed another 4 to 6 months each. Anything
conservatively, Taylor, conservatively, it gets pushed 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, I mean, the Batman 2 hasn't even finished its script. That's stopped. So it's probably not going to make its release date. Right?
There's no way it can.
All of Marvel's phase 5 and 6 is like now in limbo and is probably going to be shifted further. Obviously DC is probably going to have a similar boat where the only thing that's moving forward is Superman Legacy, but the second movie in that new slate was Batman, and that's not finished writing, and it's now stopped.
Yo, Taylor, those, it's funny as I'm thinking about James Gunn when he said, here's the projects we're working on. That Wonder Woman show isn't going to be worked on. Yeah, that Swamp Thing isn't going to be worked on, right? None of that stuff is going to get finalized.
Yeah, it's just all on hold until the strike is over, which is insane.
When do you, based on your gut, when do you think, or if we even hear when things get canceled? Do you think we'll start hearing like, oh, because it's going to change the scope of things. That's for sure. Maybe seasons are a little less episodes and stuff like that. But when do you think we hear like, oh, we're just not doing that thing because of the strike?
I think that they'll try to hide that as much as they can, because it's very bad press if a studio basically says we had to cancel this show because we didn't want to pay our writers.
Hey, Taylor, do you think Batgirl sees the light of day?
No, legally it can't.
Okay.
So I don't see it. I don't see it like that. That's not a thing that'll ever happen. But like I said, I say if this goes for a few more weeks, I see the studio heavily considering releasing the Ayer cut and the Schumacher cut and all those other things, because they're going to need content, and they're going to be like, we have so many projects that can make director's cuts with. Let's just make the director's cuts.
And I also wonder how it will affect scripts moving forward, because like Netflix just signed a huge deal with a South Korean company to get more Korean shows and game shows and love shows. So I wonder if this opens the door and all of a sudden you start seeing a lot of like Indian shows or Hindi shows, or maybe it's time for Bollywood to burst down the door. And I mean, it's already a very large proportion on Netflix. You can go watch Triple R there right now.
It's going to be very weird to see, because with the WGA being on strike, I could see a lot of these studios pushing forward with a whole new level of reality TV, like it was last time. We saw this huge push of reality TV following the first strike. I could see it happen again.
Just dating shows, Ninja Warrior shows, cooking shows, just one of each.
Yeah, just we can't afford to not have content, so let's put in a couple $1 million to make a season of this random project.
And it's got to be reality. They can't even do game shows, right? You can't even, because that's writers.
Yeah, you have to have some people write the game cards, so you can't do it.
The things that Taylor and I have only mentioned are just the things that maybe we care about, but this is going to affect Disney Channel and just all the content. All the content is going to get pushed because of this.
All the content. If it exists in Hollywood and it has anyone involving in a script, it is now in trouble.
Are there any international productions? They shoot everything in Canada, but it comes from Hollywood. Is there any shows that are protected because it's all overseas?
Not quite. If it's an American produced show, it typically has to use the American unions, even if it's filming overseas.
Wow.
So,
okay.
What's probably, you might see some stuff happening is you might see studios outsourcing completely to another studio, like Canadian, since the Canadian unions are all self-contained, like even like the BBC, like stuff like that. But speaking of the BBC, the biggest show of all time in England, Doctor Who, just made its shift over to being a joint Disney Plus show. That's probably now going to be on hold because of the fact that it's partially being produced in America.
Is American Disney Plus going to get the entire Doctor Who catalog?
They might have to, just to be able to survive what's about to occur.
Wow. When do you think we see blood in the water, Taylor? When do you think we start feeling this carnage? Another 2 weeks, another 3 weeks, another 6 weeks?
I say within the next 2 weeks. I mean, we already saw what Paramount did today by cutting what they did. I could easily see in the next couple of weeks that was just the beginning, and it's going to be so much worse.
Well, I'm sad that this content isn't going to be there, but for my countrymen who live in the wild, wild west of Hollywood, they deserve to be paid. It is their words that make all of this content possible. And there's a lot of people in this process, but it starts with the idea on a page. And streaming is only going to become more prevalent and in lots of different regards. And I think that they are in the right here. And I think that they've been taken advantage of. And I think that the last couple of years have only accelerated, but I think this was a fight that was always going to come. And I think more fights are going to come. And we just need to be prepared for it. And go buy some comic books, everybody. Go support some other mediums, because it's time to get, there's good work out there.
It's interesting because I think back to when we were kids and how when movies came out, people didn't really look at the directors. They looked at the actor, right? Mm-hmm. And then as childhood kind of the shift went to, oh, Steven Spielberg is making this. Oh, Tim Burton's making this. The directors started getting names for themselves. They became the rock stars. But now, because of this, I could see the writers getting more attention, finally. Because unless the director of the movie is also in the writing room, the director is only as good as the script they're given.
100%.
So it's going to be a hell of a thing.
Well, I hate having to play the speculation game in this way, so we won't do it anymore. I hope that there is a quick and painless solution to this. But if not, hold those front line, boys and girls. Stay strong. Do not break this, because they'll pinch you. Hollywood will take everything from you, and you deserve to be paid.
What the worst case scenario is that AI has actually moved forward enough to where they can do it. And
what do you think's the first AI show, Taylor?
Well, we're already seeing that. I mean, the fact that the scripts are already done for House of the Dragon means it's probably not going to utilize AI a lot to change anything. But if it's successful, it'll prompt another studio to say, why don't we try it? And that's what the writers are trying to prevent, is that the use of AI as a whole in the movie TV process, whether it be for the visual effects, the writing, anything, they just don't want the AI in the room at all. Art by AI is not the same as art from a person. And that's what they're arguing. So we can see all it takes is one studio to be cheap enough not to want to have that conversation and just say, you know what? Let's try it. And if they make money off of it, they're like, why don't we just keep doing this?
What a prediction. I think we leave this here, because now we just wait for the news. Now we wait to see what happens. We need news from the front, because that's all the news that fits right now.
Yeah, it's insane, but we'll see what happens in the coming weeks.
Yeah, man.
All right, let's bring it home.
I think that means I get to do the outro again. So hit us up at that patreon.com at the Cultured Nerd. Thank you for keeping the lights on around here. Look at all these wonderful patrons that give all that money to us. We appreciate all of that. All of those expenses are put to good use. Thank you so much to Jose Navarro and also Taylor Murphy and Jay Stoop for all of your wonderful graphics. Our host this week has been Taylor Murphy. I am your co-host, Michael Santel. If you got your phones out, pull them out, get those cameras on, give that code a good old scan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Our hearts go out to all of you writers. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you all, you kids and cats, next week.
All right. And as we've said multiple times on social media, we stand with the WGA on this. So we will keep supporting them, because they are what makes this thing work. So without them, there's nothing.
Hashtag support the WGA. Hashtag release the air cut. Bye, everybody.